If you watch our channel with any regularity, or if you have historically, you know that this is usually a field herping channel. We normally post, the salamanders and reptiles that we're finding. We're back home in Missouri now, and it's January, so understandably we don't have a lot of material to put out at the moment. And I was thinking it might be fun if we did some material with environmental economics. We filmed one environmental economics video way back in 2019 when we were in California. We saw all those salamanders, but we also filmed a little bit on the banks of the Klamath River talking about Chinook salmon and tradable quotas for fishermen. And we also were in an old-growth forest looking at a clear cut and talking about why timber companies so value being able to have access to old-growth forests and what the trade-offs there and the externalities are for both naturalists and timber companies. It got a pretty good reaction. And honestly, I've been wanting to revisit those topics for some time. So this just kind of makes sense since we can't really herp right now. And I think we'll be producing a video every week or two with regard to some sort of environmental economics concept, starting general and then getting into more specific things like forestries, fisheries, some herp-related things, and just some very interesting case studies like the Colorado River and water rights and things of that nature. Hopefully it'll include some interviews with people who know more about this stuff than I do. Maybe it won't, and maybe it'll even loop in some of our herp travels later in the year. The first thing we have to define in an environmental economics series is what's environmental economics. Economics as a whole you can think of as the study of scarcity. How do humans make trade-offs between scarce uses of resources? So environmental economics is a branch of economics that says, okay, assuming humans act rationally, assuming we act to maximize utility, which is granted an assumption, then how do we make trade-offs with natural resources? How do we make trade-offs with what we're going to do with land, and so forth? Now, the first specific concept we're going to delve into is how economists value what we call ecosystem services: recreation, clean air, clean water, biodiversity, the things that we all think when we think, what does nature give us? These methods all have flaws to one degree or another, but they attempt to approximate what we get out of nature. And why is that important? Well, that's important because if you want to make a cost-benefit analysis of, okay, should we develop this place, or would that actually be losing value on net for our state, our county, our country, whatever, then you need some way of estimating, even if imperfect, what you're getting out of that land from just leaving it as is. So the first way of valuing things we're going to look at, and the first use, is direct use value. Direct use value is probably the most obvious thing that comes to mind because it's you actively using the land for some purpose. So let's say you're fishing the Current River in southern Missouri, or you're birding right here on South Padre Island in Texas. Then you are getting utility or value out of that ecosystem by using it. Now, you're not using it in the same way that you use, say, groceries from the grocery store, or a vacuum cleaner, or a car. Those things you consume. So if you get a car, that's one person who can't get a car, right? Or one person who can't buy the groceries that you bought. Birding in South Padre Island, it's direct use, but it's not consumptive. You can use it, and so can other people. Your use doesn't preclude other people using it. In economics, that's what we call a non-rivalrous good. You can use it, and your use does not preclude other people from getting it. So how might we value direct use, like that example of the birder in South Padre Island? Well, one way you might say is, how much did it cost you to get here? If you've traveled 2 days and spent $500 on hotel rooms and $200 on gasoline, and we figure the opportunity value of your time is something like half your wages, well then, you must value this day at Padre Island at least, $1,300 or something. Unless you get to the place and it's not what you expected and there are tires everywhere and it's very trashy. Looking at you, Florida Wildlife Management Areas.
This is what we were talking about with all the tires on the side of the road. Don't come to Beaver Dam Wildlife management area, folks.
Not unless you need to get rid of some tires. We know in our hypothetical example that that day on Padre Island is worth at least $1,300 to the person because that's what they paid. And by definition, people do not pay prices for things unless they get at least that much utility, and likely more, out of using it. You won't pay $1 for an orange unless you get at least $1 worth of utility, or you could think about it as happiness, out of eating that orange. If you only got 50 cents out of it, you wouldn't buy the orange. And that's what we call consumer surplus, the difference between what you value the thing at and what you have to pay to get it. Another way you could look at direct use value and try to estimate it is give people surveys. Stand on South Padre Island, and every birder, every beachgoer that comes past, you give them a survey and say, okay, how far did you travel to get here? What do you value your leisure time at? How much would you be willing to pay as an entrance fee to get in here? And if you do the methodology right, you might come up with some value for how much is South Padre Island worth and what revenue does it generate. Now, granted, I will stop here and just note, we are looking at this from the economic perspective. So for those naturalists out there who are like, wait, this seems way too much like putting a material price on nature, that's correct. So this method isn't without flaw, but it is necessary to show, sometimes in legal cases, which will be the subject of episode number 2 of this series, that places have value and that they are worth preserving. Now, the second type of use value we're going to look at is called option value. And it's not really a use value at all. It's what we call indirect non-consumptive. You are not using the good at present. It's the value you put on an option to later use a good. So for instance, Bethany and I, as many of you who watch this channel know, have the probably quixotic and possibly asylum-worthy goal of seeing every salamander in the U.S. in our lifetime. We do not plan to see a Shasta salamander in California for quite some time, but we place some value on the option to see one in the future. And this is often the case with hunters as well. In many states you need to enter a lottery to hunt elk or hunt bear or hunt moose or something. So you're not going to win the lottery every year if you're a hunter, but you would still be harmed or be injured if the population of that animal in your state were to go extinct and you never had the future option to go and hunt that creature or go and observe that creature if you're more of a passive naturalist. Now, the problem with this is it's tough to value because you can't observe people directly exercising an option value. The minute they exercise the option, it's now direct use. So valuing hypothetical future goods like that is rather difficult. You can give people surveys, but that has a lot of pitfalls in it, and the survey design needs to be very precise. And in fact, that will probably be the subject of episode 3, is where how to do a survey like that and where they can fall through the cracks really, really badly, and either over or understate the value of the thing that you are studying. Now, the next value we have on ecosystem services is called bequest value. And this is the value that people place on not seeing something themselves or using some natural resource themselves, but on the ability of their children or their grandchildren or some indeterminate number of generations in the future of their posterity to use it. And this is a really odd value to think about. One of my favorite economist, Milton Friedman, was answering a question at Stanford, and someone in the audience said, why don't we just have 100% inheritance tax to redistribute the wealth so that everyone kind of has an equal chance in life? And Friedman says, I don't know the family you come from, but I think that would destroy people's incentive to work and save. And one of the things I've observed on all my years on this planet is that parents have almost an irrational desire to further their children's future, even when they have every reason to believe their children will be better off than they are. They scrimp and save and give to their kids who, are going to have a much better life than they ever did. So it's odd. People usually have a higher value on their children's consumption than they do on their own, which is kind of the opposite assumption as standard economics, which discounts future benefits at an interest rate and says, okay, a benefit next year is not as worth as much as one this year. But when we look at bequest value, that kind of flips it on its head. I think a lot of people really identify with this one, and I certainly do. You know, the prospect that my grandkids or my great-grandkids would never get to explore the Smokies as I did as a child, and I know as Bethany did. That's kind of a very sad prospect. And you can imagine a world in which you say, yeah, I'd be willing to pay a lot or see a lot of policy change in order to make sure that doesn't happen. So that's bequest value. And again, it's difficult to measure because it's something that, by definition, someone never exercises themselves. You can't see it in their direct behavior and what they're willing to spend themselves. Now, the last value we're going to talk about is called existence value. Other people call it altruism or altruism value. And this is the value that people place on simply knowing that a species exists, even if they never have the intention to go and see it. So you can think about a few examples of this one. First, think about a billionaire who lives in Manhattan. And they have no intention of ever going to the jungles of southeastern China and seeing a panda bear. But they give money to the World Wildlife Fund every year, or some other organization sort of that ilk, to make sure that the panda doesn't go extinct. So they obviously place some monetary value on the existence of the panda bear, just knowing in their mind that the panda bear exists. They place an economic value on that. In our case, again with the goal with the salamanders, even if we were to never see some of the rarest or most elusive salamanders in the U.S., like, say, reticulated flatwood salamander in Florida, or in the West, the Santa Cruz long-toed or the Scott bar salamander, it would still make us quite sad if those species went extinct. So we place some value that, again, is hard to quantify because it's almost an emotional value on knowing that they're there and knowing that they are preserved and that their habitat is intact. And then lastly, I remember when I was a child, my grandfather gave to the World Wildlife Fund and a few other charities like that because he loved mountain gorillas. And he has, in addition to horse memorabilia, he has mountain gorilla. He has a mountain gorilla pencil sharpener and several other, little statues and things of gorillas. To my knowledge, he's never had any intention of going to Central Africa and seeing a gorilla, right? And so that, for him, those donations were an expression of existence value. And again, it's difficult to quantify, but it's real value. And it's real value that those species have. And next episode, we're going to get into a Supreme Court case that basically says, for the purposes of the law, we can't consider that value as part of a cost-benefit analysis because it's so hard to quantify that courts can't look at it. So continuing with existence value, I have a question for you all that I'd like your answer to in the comments. Do you think it is moral for us humans to put existence value on species? Not individual organisms, but species as a whole. And does it kind of beg the question, I'm not going to say my opinion on this, but I just want your answers in the comments because I'm genuinely curious. Does it beg the question, well, if humans didn't care about a species, then its existence is worth nothing? And does that statement beg the question or imply that meaning is not inherent in the universe and inherent in the world, that things only mean things when humans decide they mean things? And again, I'm thinking back to sort of, the existential question about math, right? Does 2 plus 2 really equal 4? Is that a law of the universe? Is that a truth? Or is that something that humans discover and make it true by our conventions? So, same question, but with regard to existence value. What do you guys think of it? Does it seem immoral to you? Does it seem like a good tool to use in conservation and attempting to imperfectly quantify things? I don't know, just how does it strike you? I'd be interested in the comments. Well, I hope you all enjoyed the first installment of this environmental economics series. As I said, we just were in this section of the country, down here in the Atlantic coastal plain in Florida, and that video will be up shortly, probably on Bethany's channel. I want to thank Bethany, my wife, for filming, and you should check out her YouTube channel at The Herping Lizard. Please, any suggestions in the comments? Do you like this series? Do you think it's going to go somewhere interesting? Anything in particular with environmental economics you'd like covered, or any specific environmental programs you would enjoy seeing covered from sort of an economic perspective? I'd love to hear your thoughts, and stick around for episode 2 on a Supreme Court case.